I'm Dylan.
I'm Kiyan.
And this is Trust Your Doctor, that podcast with 4 hosts.
Where are they anyway?
I don't know. They were supposed to be here on time at, 5 minutes ago. But anyway, this week we watched The Three Doctors.
Written by Bob Baker and Dave Martin.
And it was directed by Lenny Mayne.
And aired from December 72 to January of 73.
Yeah. Which means it didn't actually premiere around the 10th anniversary, which would have been in November of 1973. But, close enough.
It's the 10th anniversary season.
Yeah, I guess that's what they were going for. And it worked as an anniversary serial. It wouldn't really have worked as a regular serial.
Well, it was the first serial of season 10. We can start off by saying that, but it really just, if it weren't for the fact that the second and first Doctor show up, this serial would have just fallen flat on its face, to be honest.
Yeah. Pretty much. But, at least they made a good serial to celebrate the 10 years the show was running that incorporated the previous Doctors.
And honestly, we'll get into this later, but as much as the villain sucked, I think you were saying this too, at least they introduced a villain that, in theory, it makes sense that they would need all 3 Doctors to defeat.
Yeah, and they didn't just, shoehorn in, an Ice Warrior story or something
That would have been disappointing.
Yeah, that really didn't need 3 Doctors to solve, so Serial's got that going for it. But, let's just go ahead and get into the summary, I guess. It begins with,
wilderness.
It starts as a nature documentary. Richard Attenborough's doing voiceover narration.
No. It starts off with this game warden, Mr. Allis.
Yeah.
Who's kind of just on a riverbank, I guess, or a lake bank, if that's even a term. And some investigator-looking guy drives up, questions him about something, I believe.
Yeah.
Doesn't he?
Well, I think the investigator, wow, investigator is Dr. Tyler, and I think he goes to the cottage first to Mrs. Allis, who tells him that Mr. Allis is down by the, weather balloon thing.
Yeah, the
solar particle detector device thing.
It looked like a plastic bag attached to some crude machinery.
Yeah, but it cuts to Mr. Allis, and he is investigating it, and then all of a sudden there's a flash, and then Mr. Allis is just gone.
Mr. Allis actually wasn't really an important character beyond this.
No,
he shows up again, but
yeah, a lot later.
Doesn't exactly do anything.
Yeah. Oh well. Anyway,
except that line at the end, that was just brilliant.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, Dr. Tyler wanders over to the machinery and is surprised to find that Mr. Allis is nowhere to be found.
So we jump back to, but we jump for the first time in this serial to Unit HQ, where Professor Tyler, or Dr. Tyler actually, is giving the brig, the doctor, and Joe the rundown about what happened to Mr. Allis.
Right, and the brig is accepting it and is like, "So, Doctor, what do you think?" And the doctor seems totally unimpressed until Dr. Tyler mentions that Mr. Allis was supposed to be guarding the machine, but then he disappeared. And then Dr. Tyler also brings up the fact that the machine has detected particles that appear to be moving faster than light, which is impossible.
Right, and this is when the doctor starts to get interested. But I also just wanted to mention, did you notice the change in accent here?
No.
In Dr. Tyler?
I didn't, actually.
I'm not exactly sure what either of the accents he had were called, but there was definitely a change in accent.
Yeah,
Maybe he was just trying to get along with the locals better. I don't know.
Anyway, the big complaint... the doctor tells Dr. Tyler to just kind of get settled in, and the big complaints this is supposed to be a top secret facility, and the discontinuity guide makes a silly note about this, how the brig mentions it's supposed to be top secret, but later it pans out and you see the sign in front of the building that says unit and has the brigadier's name on it.
Oh yeah, that.
But the doctor and the brig go off to go talk to someone, and Dr. Tyler is investigating the machine, only to get sucked into it like Mr. Wallace was.
Yeah. So now 2 victims to an unknown force. An underwhelming unknown force once we find out what it is, but
hilariously overpowered underwhelming force.
That's debatable.
Anyway, the doctor gets back, and Dr. Tyler was like processing one of the sheets from the machine.
Right. They also mentioned something about black holes here, just in passing in their discussion.
Yeah.
And that kind of comes into play later, or at least comes into play if you can follow the sci-fi mumbo-jumbo in this serial, which doesn't make sense. I mean, I guess maybe it makes sense. But this was around the time when black holes were first becoming a thing. Well,
yeah.
Not like first forming, but when people were first starting to investigate, what black holes even are, and kind of surprised they did something with black holes on Doctor Who.
Yeah.
At this point, because it's not. I guess it wasn't a widely known concept. You would assume that new theories coming out would be more in the domain of like hard sci-fi and the sci-fi serialized magazines back then and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Not Doctor Who, which is like a pretty widely circulated show. But they did it, so
yeah,
props.
So the doctor arrives back and investigates the sheet that Tyler wasn't investigating himself, and there's a face in the sheet, and the brig is complaining about where Alice and Tyler are, and the doctor says, well, I don't think you'll need to look very far to find Mr. Alice. Here he is. The brig doesn't believe him, but
I just want to say, for the first time in a long while, the brig has, well, I wouldn't say he plays a prominent role in this serial, but he definitely plays a more prominent role than he had in season 9. But at the same time, he was just being really obstinate for this whole serial, and
well, in about 30 seconds here, Unit's gonna get under siege, so
base under siege.
Not gonna blame him. He's kind of in a tight spot where he has to make sure that Unit doesn't get destroyed by the weird orange blobby things.
The gel guards. I'm just thinking more later, where he just doesn't want to accept this situation, but yeah, like we said, Unit gets attacked by these weird orange blob things that materialize out of nowhere, kind of in the same way Tyler and Alice dematerialized out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Or into nowhere, rather.
And right before this, when the doctor had come back from... Because he didn't go to the same place as the brig when Tyler was developing the plates. He went to look for the balloon, I think, but he came back and this weird blue and red thing comes out of the drain and takes Bessie and disappears. Bessie just pops out of existence. Yeah,
it was... I don't think we've really touched upon it, but Joe is here all along, doing pretty much nothing other than making side comments. Anyway, the blue and red blob thing, I don't know, it was kind of just a 70s special effects type deal, but it looked like, it made me think, hey, should I be wearing 3D glasses right now? Because it kind of looked like, if you're watching a 3D movie or something like that and you have the glasses off, it just looks all split and blurry and the images overlap and it's red and blue. Yeah, it kind of looked like that.
Right. Yeah, and anyway, the brig and Benton are now freaking out that Tyler has also gone missing, and the doctor's like, just chill out, guys. It's totally fine. But, oh yeah, Bessie's gone, by the way. And the brig is like, where's Bessie going? What are you doing, doctor? And the doctor's like, oh, there's just this antimatter thing just eating things. I think it's around this point that the doctor figures out that the being is coming for him and not anyone else, and everyone else just was kind of collateral damage, so to speak.
Right, they do some weird. I think Joe actually figures this out. So yeah, I guess she actually is doing something, but they do some minor, quick. I don't want to say experiment, but they kind of see who the blob goes after in some way. I forget how they do it, but they determine that it's the Doctor. Like
Yeah. Yeah, they figure that out somehow. Benton has gone off to guard the garage now where Bessie was because he thought it was an explosion, but no, it was just the Bessie being stolen. And, he goes to guard the garage, and now the Big and the Doctor discuss some things some more. They find Alice, and then the Doctor is talking to the Big when they get attacked by the jail guards for the first time.
Right, and then a firefight ensues between the unit and the jail guards, and unsurprisingly, regular old-fashioned bullets have no effect on the alien race of the week.
Yeah. But, they kind of just plunder forward and kill off a couple unit guys on their way in.
Yeah, you had one of the jail guards is dying. I didn't, so we don't really know.
I guess we're just not counting it because it doesn't really make sense, I suppose. So we're just counting 3 unit guys as having died there. Yeah, they just get murdered in cold blood. And inside now, the Big is freaking out because for the first time in the show's history, Unit is being directly attacked, and all of these people are directly under his command.
Well, if you want to count Web of Fear stuff as Unit not
didn't
really
exist in Web of Fear.
I assume that Unit was formed out of Web of Fear vets. I mean, I don't know.
I guess so. It was formed between Web of Fear and the Invasion. Because it existed in the Invasion.
Yep.
When
that was its first appearance.
Right, when Troughton shows up.
Meanwhile, on Gallifrey...
Oh, yeah.
The Time Lords are freaking out over the attack. Apparently they're following it somehow.
Well, because they're also being attacked.
Oh, they were?
Yeah, that was why they had to send in the doctors, because they were being attacked and they didn't have enough energy to mount a counterattack.
Well, that makes sense considering what we find out later.
Yeah, so the Time Lords are being attacked by the same creature from beyond the wormhole. And they're kind of having a mental breakdown about what to do. And one of the Time Lords... Oh, well, the Time Lords come into this because the Doctor and Joe are in the TARDIS, and the Doctor... With Benton gets into the TARDIS for the first time in the show. And the Doctor makes a snide comment about how isn't he going to say it's bigger on the inside because everyone does. And Benton says, well, isn't that obvious? But they're in the TARDIS, and the creature is in the lab with them, and the Doctor calls for help from the Time Lords. He activates the Mayday. So now the Time Lords know that the Doctor is also being attacked by the same creature. So they're like, guys, this is bad. Guys.
So one of the Time Lords wants to send in, quote-unquote, backup. And another one of the Time Lords is opposed to that because apparently it would be breaking... I think the first law of time, they said. I don't know. It was something like that. The first law of time, I guess. And the other Time Lord says, no, we have to do it. The situation is dire. It calls for it.
Before we continue, I was, once again, the discontinuity guide having all the really random trivia. One of the Time Lords is actually played by the same actor who played a Time Lord in the War Games. So, maybe it's the same character, but...
Yeah, maybe not. That was, 3 years ago? 3 to 4?
3 to 4, yeah. Because it was the end of season 6, so it was, close to 3 years ago. But I don't think the Time Lords were named, so whether or not they're the same character is kind of, up in the air anyway, so... But yeah, they argue for a bit, and eventually they decide, well... the only one who can really get us out of this is the Doctor, I guess, since he's not on Gallifrey being attacked and unable to leave. At least he's somewhere where he can leave, so...
They should have called in the Master. No.
Where is the Master right now? What happened to him at the end of the previous serial? Which was, what? I forgot what we watched last week. The Time Monster. Oh, yeah.
He's off wreaking havoc somewhere, probably.
Probably. But they decide, right, well, we don't have much power left, but we can probably send in the Second Doctor to help the Third Doctor after they pull up some imagery of the Second Doctor and like, well, the desperate times call for desperate measures, right?
Right, and they actually, I don't know if they've ever said this before, but they call the Second Doctor Second Doctor.
Right.
I think this might be the first time, and honestly, since I started watching Doctor Who right from the very beginning, I don't know in the future if they refer to, or whether or not they refer to the Doctors as like 4th, 5th, 6th, etc., or if that's just a fan term. I honestly don't even know.
In the reboot, it only occurs very sporadically where the Doctor will say, oh yeah, I'm the 11th, or whatever. But they also specifically later refer to the First Doctor as being the first, and there's no Doctors before the First Doctor, so if anyone had weird fan fiction where they're like, this is actually the First Doctor, he regenerates into Hartnell. No, you're wrong. It doesn't work. Denied. Yeah, they gather up some energy and they, send off the Second Doctor. The cuts back to the TARDIS at this point, right?
Yeah, and Joe finds the recorder. Yeah, that recorder from it's the Second Doctor's recorder, and she holds it up, and then Troughton pops out of nowhere and thanks her for finding it for him.
Yeah, of course they're late. Impeccable timing. Right on time.
I don't believe you. Yeah, no, you're not even close to being on time.
What's that?
I told you. Well, where are we then?
You could introduce yourselves for the listeners, Oh, right. I'm Dylan.
And I'm Kiyan. Actually, we just came straight from recording the episode for the Green Death.
Ah, yes, that episode it's actually pretty...
Oh, we can't tell them that.
Oh, right. Anyway, so we left off at Troughton appearing in the TARDIS. Right, and Troughton criticizes the new TARDIS interior. The nerve!
As he should. They got rid of last season's washing up bowl interior. Right, and as we mentioned last week, the washing up bowl set, which was actually designed by Tim Gleason, was damaged, so they couldn't use it again.
Yeah, it was actually warped in storage, not broken like we assumed, between season 9 and 10, so this serial features the first appearance of a new console room, this time designed by Roger Limonton.
Right, and it's sort of back to how it originally looked during the first and second Doctor's run. Not quite the same, but pretty close.
Now, what about Benton? He was right outside, wasn't he?
Well, at this point, he's seen Troughton appear, and he's quite pleased to see, quote-unquote, his Doctor back.
Right, and Pertwee also explains to Jo what's going on, and she just kind of accepts it?
Well, Troughton jumps in to help explain, but yeah, she takes it surprisingly well. Yet another instance of Jo being passive.
Well, to be fair, there isn't really time in this serial for her to do anything else. The serial crams in a lot of stuff, right?
Yeah, and actually, I know you were mentioning this earlier, not in the episode, but just earlier, that they were originally going to have Jamie and Zoe show up, as the Second Doctor's companions, but they opted not to go that route because, well, one, scheduling conflicts with the actors, and also Pertwee thought it would be best not to include more characters because I guess he just thought it would get over convoluted. And, part of me thinks he's right because Jo doesn't exactly do much, and then they have Alice, who really doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
And Tyler he explains some of the more sciencey stuff.
Right.
And he does do something a little bit later, but part of me thinks that was filler.
Yeah, and then there's also Benton and the
We're
Brig.
still doing it.
Benton and the Brig, who are also kind of vaguely doing some things, but not as much as they would be if this was a regular serial.
Yeah, I mean, of course, they did have to have the doctors doing most of the stuff. Otherwise, the serial would sort of just lose its novelty. And even then, it's mostly Pertwee and Troughton, of course.
Yeah. Yes. Well, anyway, the Brig is busy trying to hold back the jail guards with his troops.
Of course, back in the TARDIS, Troughton and Pertwee are having a difficult time getting along. No surprise there. But they do this weird thing called contact, where I guess they synchronize their minds or something.
Yeah, they close their eyes and communicate telepathically, and the first time they do this, I guess Pertwee uses it to bring Troughton up to speed on the situation.
Meanwhile, the Time Lords are upset that Pertwee and Troughton aren't getting along, as if they could have expected otherwise.
Right, and of course they're desperate. So who do you think they send over to help?
Good old Hartnell, of course. Yeah, the first Doctor is back in action. Sort of. At this point, Hartnell's actually retired from acting, and as his arteriosclerosis had been getting worse over the years.
Right, and as much as Hartnell would have liked to run around with Troughton and Pertwee, his wife went over his head and told the BBC no.
Right, so when the BBC found out, they rewrote the script, and all of Hartnell's lines are actually recorded in studio, where you can read the lines off of cue cards. And the in-serial explanation for this was that his timecraft got stuck in a time eddy.
Something like that.
Yeah, it was actually... Well, do you want to go into his acting later, or...
Yeah, let's do it a bit later when we've explained more of it, so that the listener knows what we're talking about, since he doesn't really do much right now.
Yeah. Back to the story, Hartnell has verbally slapped some sense into Troughton and Pertwee, and they flip a coin to decide something.
Yes, and Joe and Benton express disbelief that there is, in fact, another Doctor, but before they can inquire further, Troughton is at the controls, ready to open the door. Yeah, as Troughton opens the door, Pertwee rushes outside and is followed closely by Joe, who doesn't want him to go, obviously.
Again.
So both of them are shot by a beam from the blue and red antimatter organism thing, and that's where our time is up.
Yes, now that that's all done and dealt with, we'll be seeing you two later. Or rather, you two will be seeing us, or becoming us, or...
Oh, don't bother.
Wait, how is your time up? You have a time machine!
Goodbye!
Yes, it's been a pleasure meeting us. So long. Well, they were weird.
Yeah, so anyway, that's where episode 1 ends.
Yeah, and I think it actually ends on... Or, no, it ends with, obviously, the cliffhanger with the Doctor and Joe getting shot. But then Troughton also makes this comment... Not Troughton, I'm sorry. Hartnell makes this comment over the monitor. Something like, so these are my successors, a dandy and a clown? I don't know, I really like that line. Except he actually he reads it with less emotion than I just did.
Cut him a break. He's dying.
Yeah, it's true.
Right, so episode 2 begins obviously with the rehash of that, and they disappear, and then Troughton and Benton go out of the TARDIS actually and run into the brig, and now the brig is just like, what Doctor?
Benton tries to explain that there are two of them now, but the brig isn't having any of it. He just thinks the Doctor somehow reverted back to his previous form, which is a reasonable assumption to make, actually. He just randomly switched forms before, so...
Why not now?
Yeah.
Anyway, Benton is like, yeah, it's the first one, Brig, and the Brig's like, sure, whatever. It doesn't really matter. If he gets the job done, I don't care. And then, the Brig's like, well, we have a problem. Geneva's like, what's going on? We're being attacked. And, Troughton mentions he can probably control the creature. So the Brig lets him do that for a bit to build this weird device, but then the Brig comes back and needs the Doctor to come talk to Geneva.
Right, he actually told Geneva to avoid confusion because I guess they know the third Doctor and they recognize his appearance and everything, so he didn't want to cause any trouble. So he just told Geneva that Troughton was Pertwee's assistant, and the second Doctor is not pleased with this.
Clearly, but I don't think he has a choice. So he leaves Benton in charge of the device, and...
Smart.
Benton immediately just buggers everything up. So he, takes out a piece of gum and throws the wrapper into the creature and aggravates it, and now all hell breaks loose.
Is this the part where the entire mansion gets teleported?
Yeah, the Brig goes into the TARDIS. The Brig is upset because he thinks the Doctor's been building the TARDIS with unit money. Right,
because this is actually the first time he's been in, right?
Yeah, him and Benton both go in for the first time this serial.
Yeah, Benton went in earlier. He kind of just accepts it, and the Brig he mentions that, what is this, an optical illusion or something like that? And yeah, the Brig, like I said before, is being really obstinate this serial.
Yeah, but shoot, I was gonna say something. Oh well. Troughton is put up the shields, and the Brig wants to get out, and Troughton's obviously not gonna let him get out. And then it cuts to the Time Lords, still freaking out about being attacked, and complaining that they used so much energy to send the first and second Doctor over, but the first Doctor didn't quite make it.
Right. So, yeah, the TARDIS... Well, the second Doctor realizes that I don't think we mentioned it, but he built a machine to pacify the antimatter being.
Mm-hmm.
And he realizes once they're in the TARDIS with the shields up that he actually built a machine that would aggravate it because it's an antimatter being, so he would need to rework or reverse all of the effects of the machine to have the desired effect, if that makes sense.
Right.
I'm explaining this really poorly, but basically, since it's an antimatter being, he would need to build a machine that would have the opposite effect.
But yeah, whoops.
So either way, they dematerialize and they end up taking the entire house with them.
Right. The first Doctor, well, Troughton's like, "What do I do? What do I do?" And Hartnell's like, "Well, you know what? Just take down the shields." And Troughton's like, "Wait, but oh!" So he does that. The whole house disappears. Meanwhile, while this is all happening, the third Doctor and Joe are actually on this desert planet.
Right. They wake up in what looks like a huge rock quarry.
Because it was.
Yeah. And
filming-wise, that is.
Joe immediately assumes they're dead.
Again.
Yeah, and I don't know what's with the writers and having Joe assume they're dead all the time, but it happens.
Right. But they figure out they're not dead because they find, one, the Brig's computer.
Right, they're walking around this quarry and they see all of this stuff that was in the room before they were zapped by the antimatter being.
Including the wall. Just the wall.
I don't know, I had to laugh when Joe goes, "What's this?" And it's this giant metallic tower, taller than Pertwee. And the Doctor says, "Oh, it's a computer."
Yeah, it's a Brig's computer.
And it's just so ridiculous for someone living in current times.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if anyone listens to this 10 years from now, I'm sure they'll laugh at us with what a 1 foot by 1 foot computer. That's ridiculous.
Probably.
But yeah.
Anyway, they find Bessie and they're like, "Well, let's just go for a nice little country drive." Lol, no, they get attacked by the gel guards.
Right, and if you haven't guessed yet, they're in the antimatter universe, past the past the event horizon or something like that. Inside the black hole. Yes. But with 1/1,000,000th of the budget because they're just in a rock quarry, which honestly I find quite strange that the inside of a black hole would look so down to earth. But obviously they were working on a budget of pocket lint and paper clips, so there you have it.
Right, and now Troughton, Brig, Benton, right, have shown up on the planet, and the Brig refuses to believe they've moved, mainly because the scanner shows the inside of the house. So they go out, and the Brig opens the door, and he's like, "Doctor, what is this?"
He thinks it's a beach somewhere, and he wants to contact Geneva to tell them what's happened, I guess, but the doctor says, "Oh no, I don't think you'll be getting through to Geneva anytime soon."
The Brig, obviously doesn't believe him, as most companions don't believe the doctor on the first trip in the TARDIS.
Benton.
Well, Benton's just going along with it, I guess, because his role was rewritten from Jamie's.
Right, and he's sort of comic relief, so it's sort of funny that he just accepts everything on the first go-around.
Right.
Yates is nowhere to be seen in this serial, by the way, just in case anyone was wondering.
He's just gone. Maybe he's on leave. He gets to avoid this terrible turn of events to, hang out on an actual beach.
Right, maybe he's recovering from the bomb blast.
Wow. Anyway, the third Doctor and Joe have been captured, and they've taken to this building that's cut into the side of the rock face, I guess.
Yeah.
And this is actually into episode 3 now, because episode 2 ended when the whole house disappeared. Episode 3, so Pertwee's meeting the leader of the world, and it's revealed that it's someone named Omega.
Right, we didn't mention the part with Tyler running away, but that's not important. That was actually what I mentioned before that I thought was filler, because Tyler gets captured with them. The Doctor and Joe are on board to see who's capturing them, because there's really nothing else they can do. Tyler just gets scared and runs away, and he eventually gets recaptured, and then they meet Omega, like you said.
And there's one thing we should mention, because it comes into play later, but the Doctor's trying to explain to Tyler how the antimatter universe can exist by doing these magic tricks, and he pulls a bouquet of flowers out of his sleeve, and then he gives it to Joe, and Joe accidentally drops it when they're leaving. But that comes into play later.
Yeah. So Omega, I guess actually, I don't know, is Omega the British English pronunciation of Omega?
I think so.
Okay, yeah. I'm not going to call him Omega, just for clarity's sake, I'm going to call him Omega.
Yeah, me too. It makes more sense in the context of the serial, to be honest. It's like that time we had that character named Beta. We couldn't decide if it was Beta or not.
What serial was that?
A long time ago, I don't remember.
But right, his Omega was originally going to be called Ohm, because spelled O-H-M, like the horseshoe little thing symbolized in
yeah, that symbol is actually, ironically, it's the Greek letter Omega.
I guess it's where it comes from then.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Ohm because it's who upside down. Ha ha ha.
Funny. If one laughs, I'll go home. Glad they didn't go with that. That would have been too campy even for this serial.
Omega, I don't know if you noticed it. We haven't explained him at all, but I don't know if you noticed it, but he was actually credited in episode 2, and I was like, wait, what? Who's Omega?
He had that very brief scene where he was just triumphant that the third Doctor had fallen into his trap, but it was just from behind and you couldn't see any features of him.
Yeah, I guess they had to credit him anyway.
Probably.
I thought he was just... this is stupid, but I thought for a second maybe the gel guards were named and one of them was Omega. I didn't really think much of it until he showed up
until now.
3, yeah.
He has one of the most extravagant costumes in the entire show so far.
Yeah, it's really glistening.
Yeah, and he's got this bright gold mask on his head, and green and gold robes. I feel like they spent most of their budget for the serial on that costume.
The effects are pretty good in this serial. You got, I guess, for the 70s. But you got the antimatter organism.
Well, at the end there with the smoke and the...
Yeah.
That was pretty good.
That sound effect, though. We'll get there. I don't know if you noticed it. But anyway, Omega is... I don't think he reveals all of this yet, but as usual, I think we're just going to info dump it all here just to make sense of things. Omega is, I guess, an ancient Time Lord, and he was the one who introduced time travel to the Time Lords.
I think the third Doctor actually says that when it's revealed that it's Omega, the third Doctor says, "Oh, you're a hero, you created time travel." And then Omega explains how the supernova that he created to give the Time Lords power to time travel had trapped him in the antimatter universe. And, the third Doctor said that all of Time Lord society basically believed Omega to be dead.
Right, and this is where I started disliking, I guess, Omega, because he's just not the brightest star in the sky.
He's been trapped there for thousands of years. I think he's actually gone a little bit off his rocker, to be honest.
Yeah, but I don't know. I guess he just assumes the Time Lords abandoned him, when no, really, they actually pretty much worship him, and they just thought he was dead, so they never bothered trying to save him, which I guess is a reasonable assumption to make. He got caught in a supernova.
Yeah.
But he just assumes they abandoned him to his fate, and that's why he wants revenge, and that's why he's attacking the Doctor and the Time Lords.
I don't know, it's probably along the lines of he's been in solitude for a long time, been thinking it over, and his brain just kind of twisted it into the Time Lords abandoning him rather than the rational thing, which is just they thought he was dead.
I guess, and there's really no way for him to, or there wasn't a way for him to leave the antimatter universe, and we find out later that this plan that he's enacting now is actually his way of trying to get out.
Right.
But we don't know that yet. Right now, we just think he's bent. At least I thought he was just hell-bent on destroying everything.
Right. Meanwhile, outside, the brig has actually run into, whatchamacallit, Alice. And
right, Alice is kind of just creeping around. He mentions that he managed to evade the jail guards because he's good at stalking and hunting and whatnot.
Yeah, but they see the jail guards escorting the second Doctor, Troughton, and Benton to the base as well. So the brig's like, well, it's time to launch an all-frontal assault, but not yet. We have to recon first. The big brig, very methodical military mind, of course. But inside, the third Doctor is conversing with Omega when Troughton shows up. And Pertwee is like, "What are you doing, Troughton?" Troughton, why?
You're making everything worse. Omega, he knows that Troughton's a Time Lord. I wasn't sure if he knew they were the same Time Lords.
He figures it out later, like in a couple minutes after Pertwee and Troughton banter back and forth, and I think they let something slip, and Omega's like, "Oh, the same Time Lord." Something
like that. It's not really pertinent, though, actually, because he just throws them all in a cell anyway.
Yeah, and Joe, being proactive, actually comes up with the idea to break out because Omega had let it slip that his will was his only thing keeping the entire world, that planet, alive in the antimatter universe. And Joe's like, "Wait, but you're both Time Lords. Like, couldn't your guys' will up a door or something?" And they're like, "Oh, wait, duh."
God, that was dumb.
So they do. And they escape and head for the Singularity Room. Well, Troughton and Pertwee head for the Singularity Room and tell everybody else to stay put. But of course, no. Why would they do that? That would break the entire modus operandi of the show.
I don't think we mentioned it. And they actually barely just mentioned it in passing on the show, I believe. But the Singularity is sort of just the center of everything. I guess it's really holding the antimatter universe together, along with Omega's will.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that it's a planet that they're on. I don't think it's ever specifically stated either way, but that's interesting because I just thought it was some sort of weird space. Not that it matters, but...
Not really, no. It doesn't.
It's just interesting that you thought of it in such a different way.
Yeah.
But yeah, Joe and everyone else decides to run for it, and they almost get captured, but they find the bouquet of flowers that Joe had dropped before, so they use that to discern the way to the entrance. So they get out, as the Brig and Alice are trying to get in, but they all make their escape together.
Right. They all hop into Bessie, and the Brig drives Bessie back to Unit HQ. He makes this funny remark about how they're going back to Unit HQ, and Joe's like, wait, what? And he's like, don't worry, you'll see.
I don't know if the Brig has even accepted that they're in another dimension yet. I think maybe he just still thinks they're on a beach somewhere.
I think he accepts that they're not on Earth, but I don't think he knows that they're on another dimension. So at some point, Chow's like, oh, we're a lot further than just Earth, Brigadier. And the Brig's like, okay.
Oh, no, he makes that comment, like, what? We're in another... Or, Troughton actually says, oh, we're because the Brig... I'm having to go back even further. The Brig remarks that, oh, I think we're on a beach in such and such beach in, I assume, England. Mm-hmm. And Troughton says, oh, we're a lot farther than that, Brig. And he says, what? We're in another country?
There's going to be international repercussions for this. Troughton's like, I don't think you'll have to worry about that, Brig. We're a lot further than that.
Yeah, either way, they make their break for it. Meanwhile, Troughton and Pertwee are still back in the base. Hartnell, in case you haven't guessed, hasn't exactly been doing much aside.
Well, he talks to the Time Lords at this point. So the Time Lords are like, we need to send you over there. We're going to lose the last of our energy to send you in there to help them. He's like, all right, I'll do that. Probably just as unenthusiastically as that was.
Maybe this is a good time. We'll do it later, actually.
We'll do it at the end. So the third and second Doctor are like, well, we'll do a battle of wills with you, Omega. And he's like, well, if you're going to battle me, you'll battle the dark side of my mind. And then there's this weird, trippy battle sequence with an all-black backdrop, and Pertwee is fighting something in Omega's mind.
Yeah, it looked like some sort of devil or demon or something.
And that's how episode 3 ends.
And episode 4 begins with the cliffhanger ending of 3. But I thought what they were going for with this black space was sort of a zero-G type of thing, just with the way they turned the camera angle. It was upside down at some points, and just it kept I don't want to say spinning, but it sort of moved along with Pertwee and whoever it was he was fighting, which we don't often get in this show. Yeah. I know way back in the 10th Planet, we said we were getting a lot of interesting camera angles and sort of a move towards modern cinematography. No, actually no.
It never went anywhere. But Troughton jumps in and is like, wait, if you kill him, you ruin any chance of leaving. And Omega's like, oh, right, you're right, whoops.
See, this is just why Omega is so dumb. I mean, yeah, I guess you can justify it. Yeah, I guess you can justify it by saying, oh yeah, okay, he's one, gone over the deep end because he's been locked up in antimatter space for who knows how many years. 2, he really just wants to leave. And 3, he's basically got nothing to lose. So...
yeah, all 3 of those. And he's also hilariously overpowered, like Celestial Toymaker level power.
Well, the Doctors have this kind of the same power that he does in his universe.
Yeah, but not as powerful, because obviously they haven't been there for thousands of years. Should have just used the Celestial Toymaker.
No, didn't we agree that Omega was actually a good villain in theory? Because he's a Time Lord, so it makes sense that they would need 3 Time Lords to defeat him, because he's sort of like this legendary figure.
Yeah.
Either way, what happens
Yeah, they send
next?
in Hartnell, and Troughton and Pertwee actually somehow make an escape. I don't remember how.
I don't either.
But they make it outside, pursued by jail guards, only to find Bessie has gone missing, and he's like, oh wait, I was sure I left Bessie here. And Troughton's like, well, you did. Look, there's tire tracks leading that way. They must be heading back to Unit HQ. And now Pertwee's like, wait, what? So they all run back to Unit HQ. And Benton and the Brig have locked the doors, and the Brig is like, all right, well, we've got no doctor, so we've got to plan an attack. We've got to rescue him. And then there's this furious knocking at the door to let them in. And Benton's like, Brig, they're here. We got to let them in.
Not to break this flow, but we skipped the part where they take off the mask, didn't we?
Yeah.
happens before this because it happens before they devise their plan. I think we should explain that. It was kind of important.
Yeah.
Before they make their escape, Omega explains how, I guess, or actually I think they reveal to Omega, the doctors that is, reveal to Omega that the antimatter universe is only being kept intact by the power of his own will, and that everything probably just would have collapsed if it hadn't been for him. He says, what? No, that's impossible. I actually forget how he takes it. But either way, Omega removes his mask for some reason or the other.
He tells the doctors that they'll need the mask to control the universe when he leaves. So he's like, you'll need this mask.
Right, because at this point, he's revealed his plan that we actually revealed earlier, where he needed the doctors to take his place to hold up the fabric of the antimatter universe so that he could leave, because apparently he couldn't just leave without everything imploding on itself. So that was his plan all along. So he takes off the mask, and he doesn't have a head.
Yep.
That's that. He kind of breaks down. He gives a Mark Hamill level no.
I actually think Omega's actor was one of the best serial-specific actors we've had in the show so far. He plays the part really well.
Well, he overplays it, I think, in part because he's masked the whole time, so he kind of just has to rely on his voice instead of his face. I agree. I don't think his acting was bad. I just think this no was kind of bad. I mean, it was like Mark Hamill's no in episode 5. You know, Mark Hamill wasn't a bad actor as Luke, but that no it wasn't good.
No.
That's not possible. No, I don't know.
Well, anyway, that's when the second Doctor and the third Doctor make their escape.
Right, and Omega says he goes into a rage and says, then if this place is only being held up by my will, then my will is to destroy. And then that's when they make their escape.
Right, and so they bust into Unit HQ, they all run into the TARDIS, and then Hartnell shows up, and he's like, very nice, guys. So now what? Now they all do contact.
Right.
And they do some telepathic thinking, like, well, we may have an idea. And so they're opening up the shield generator of the TARDIS, and what do you know? Troughton's recorder is just stuck in the shield generator.
Right, we hadn't touched on it too much, but Troughton had actually been looking for his recorder the entire time and sort of pestering the other characters about if they'd seen it or not, or like where it was. And it was actually it was going into annoying territory, but then it actually becomes pertinent to the plot, which was kind of cool. And I like that they brought it back with Troughton. It was part of his character, so
yeah,
I'm glad they brought that back.
The third Doctor, Pertwee's like, hey, we could use that. And Troughton is upset and doesn't want to let him use it before realizing what the third Doctor, Pertwee, means. And Pertwee offers to buy him like 1,000 new recorders if they get out of this alive. And then they depressingly tell their companions there may be a way out, but whatever they do, they have to do whatever the Doctor says.
Right, another instance. This has been something that's been ongoing in all of Troughton and Pertwee's run, really. And somewhat Hartnell's, I guess, but we didn't really even touch upon it until Troughton, is that the Doctors just act on their own, here and in their individual serials. They often don't reveal to their companions what they're doing. Here, I think it's justified. Yeah. Other times, I think it's not. But this continues with that. And
Pertwee's been getting better about it, I think.
Yeah, Troughton, I think we had a trend of Troughton getting better about it over the second Doctor's run. But then it shows up again here. This time I think it's okay. This time it works out in the end, and also I think they were justified in that pretty much everyone there wouldn't have gone along with it if they had known what they were doing. But yeah, that's what they tell them.
And Omega, they contact Omega using the TARDIS and tell him.
I guess it can do that. I was iffy on this scene. I was like, wait, they can just contact Omega? All right, whatever. Serial didn't make sense either. It already went into this doesn't make sense territory anyway, so whatever.
Anyway, Omega complains about them trying to trick him, and they're like, no, we have a way to get you out. No, it's totally legit. So they show up, and Troughton and Pertwee leverage their plan to get Omega to let everybody else go back to where they came from. So Omega lets them go, and Joe's like, no, and Pertwee shouts back, you promised, Joe. But so they all head off. Benton makes Joe go. They go through the smoke and then they disappear, which was pretty impressive for the 70s, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I guess it was just the same thing they did with the jail guards, where they just cut the footage.
Yeah.
My main problem with this was not problem, but just annoyance with this was the sound effect that played when they walked through the smoke. It was sort of sounded like a God, I don't even know how to describe it other than like a twinkling star sound effect.
Is that because the second Doctor played Twinkle Twinkle Little Star earlier on his recorder?
You noticed the sound effect, right? I just thought
vaguely.
It was out of place. It didn't sound like a walking through smoke sound effect to me, but whatever, I'm nitpicking again.
Anyway, the Brig tries to be stoic about it, but you can see he's on the verge of breaking down, but he tells the doctors goodbye and then salutes them before heading off into the smoke. I guess he thought he was never going to see them again, which, fair assumption, given the situation they're in.
Yeah, I thought also the companions didn't really know what they were getting into, / they didn't trust Omega, because... supposedly they'd walk into the smoke and return home, and that is what happens, but I'd be wary rather.
Yeah, but the Brig salutes the Doctor. He's not all cold-hearted as you may make him out to be.
I don't think the Briggs is ever characterized as cold-hearted.
He's not.
Strict and sometimes stoic and definitely obstinate, but I don't think cold-hearted. But
yeah, so anyway, heads off. Now it's just Troutwee. I started saying Troughton and changed my mind halfway through. Troughton and Pertwee talking to Omega. Jeez. And they tell him that they have a way out for him, and they try to give him the recorder, and he's like, is this a joke? And he slaps it aside, and the recorder hits the floor and starts blowing up. And, that's the Doctor's cue. They jump into the TARDIS and get away. I guess they get away through the hole that the recorder creates in space-time.
Yeah, this doesn't make any sense. They explain it later, but I didn't care. It didn't make sense.
Well, the explanation was like the recorder got stuck in the shield generator when when the TARDIS came through originally to the antimatter universe. So in the process of coming through, it wasn't converted to antimatter, which ties into the fact at the beginning when the antimatter creature showed up, and everyone was like, wait, but when antimatter and matter touch, shouldn't they just blow up? And they're like, well, I guess the antimatter creature's somehow been converted to matter. It's being held together by some force or something. So the recorder wasn't converted to antimatter, so it was still regular matter, so it blew up when it hit the floor.
Yeah, I didn't make sense of any of that. I kind of stopped following it when they tried to start explaining it.
Just shut off your brain.
Yeah.
Kind of have to watch this serial, to be honest.
Right, but either way, they get back while everyone's sort of mourning, oh no, we're never going to see the doctors again. And then they show up.
Yeah, when all of a sudden, whatever. Everyone's pleased, and then, Hartnell shows up on the monitor, is like, well, here we are. Troughton's like, yes, we all survived. Very, very well and good. Hartnell's like, well, good. I shudder to think what you'll do without me. Then Hartnell disappears.
Right, they leave kind of abruptly, actually, I thought.
Well, less abruptly than I would have thought. They showed up, super abruptly, and at least when they left, they said goodbye, and they didn't just pop out of existence. But yeah, the Brig is like, wait a minute. Is that another? And Benton's like, yep. And Brig's like, wow, 3 of them. I didn't know I was so well off. And then Troughton says goodbye. He heads off, and then the Brig and Benton are like, well, we've got to go contain the situation outside and talk to Geneva, so see you later, Doctor. And the Doctor and Joe are like, well, I wish there was another way to do it without killing Omega, but it was the only release we could give him.
Yeah, I mean, after presumably thousands of years, I don't think they ever actually confirmed how long Omega was there, but, presumably thousands of years. Um, maybe death was the only thing you kind of hoped for.
Yeah.
Other than getting out alive and forcing the doctors to stay there. I guess that would have been Omega's happily ever after, but it doesn't happen, so sucks.
Yeah, the Doctor's upset, I guess, because Omega was one of his heroes. He mentioned earlier, like, everybody had looked up to Omega in their childhood because he was, like, the guy who gave the Time Lords time travel. He was kind of a hero in Gallifreyan society.
Right.
But then that all...
He never even knew that himself, but
yeah.
Whatever.
But, and then there's kind of this weird sound effect, and then you look, Pertwee looks over to the console. Yeah, it's the TARDIS sound effect, and Pertwee looks over to the console, and there's a new dematerialization circuit waiting for him. And he now remembers time travel theory, and he mentions that the Time Lords have forgiven him.
Yep, so his exile on Earth is over.
And, actually this pretty, like, vaguely sad scene where Joe's like, so I guess you're gonna leave now, Doctor. He's like, oh no, not yet. I've still got lots of things to do here, Joe. Don't worry about it.
Right, I think he mentions he needs to build a new force field.
Yeah, he needs to build a new force field generator. Because they left theirs in the antimatter universe. Joe's happy about that, but he's not leaving immediately. And then it cuts to Mr. Alice.
This ending was just amazing. You'd think they'd end the three doctors on something to do with one of the three doctors, but no. It ends with Mr. Alice walking down the path to his house. His wife scolds him for being away for so long and asks him where he was. He just looks at her, just stares at her for, about 5 seconds, and then says, "You wouldn't understand even if I told you. Supper ready yet?" Walks away, and it just cuts to the credits. What? I mean, it was amazing, amazingly bad, but just I don't know what to say.
Come on, don't lie. You had a good chuckle when it was on, and then you were like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense.
Well, it made more sense than the friggin' antimatter universe getting destroyed, but I don't know, it was just weird.
So yeah, the serial ends, the third Doctor's exile has been lifted, the first and second Doctors are back in their own time, Brigg and Benton are doing damage control, and it's all happy-go-lucky at the end. No lasting ramifications on Earth or something that need to be cleared up.
Except for the families of those unit soldiers who died. Just think about them.
That's what the Brigg and Benton are doing. They're doing damage control. I'm like, sorry, your son, daughter, cousin got killed by these creatures from an antimatter universe. Look, it wouldn't make sense if I tried to explain. Just accept it. Your family member is dead.
The same thing Mr. Alice told his wife. Okay, I think the main thing we need to get into here is Hartnell's acting, which we've been putting off until now. And I think we can both just agree that, one, it was just terrible, but two, we can't blame him.
Right. It's just stilted, unemotional, but on the other hand, his memory is pretty much gone at this point, which is why he's reading it off a cue card. You can tell he's reading it off a cue card. It's like obvious.
You can even see his eyes sort of, moving to read it. And, it's sort of like what news anchors do. They're trained to just look straight ahead and sort of read in their peripheral vision. But, obviously Hartnell isn't trained in that, so he has to kind of look over the card.
And, it's sad, actually, that Hartnell really enjoyed being the Doctor. We talked about this in his retrospective, and he pretty much jumped at the opportunity to be able to play the Doctor again, and he just wasn't physically able to play the role as he had before.
Yeah, / mentally able, because he couldn't memorize the lines.
And but it was good to see him back on screen. At least I enjoyed having him back, even though it was like for a couple minutes total.
I think I kind of disagree with that, because on the one hand, yeah, it's cool, the first Doctor's back, but on the other hand, kind of thought, maybe it would have been better. I mean, obviously, I guess they didn't want to have just the second and third Doctor back. That would have kind of been a blow to Hartnell, like saying,
Yeah.
okay, Troughton's back, but you're not because you can't do it. So they kind of just had to put him in somehow. But I think, honestly, it probably would have been better just to have the last sort of memory is of Hartnell as the Doctor to actually be good instead of this.
I
And that's just up to the person to decide who's watching. But, I think it would have been better for Hartnell's last impression as the Doctor to be, when he could actually act.
He was trying so hard was the thing. You could tell he was trying to make it good.
Yeah.
He just couldn't.
Which is why it was really sad watching it. And I guess, I don't really know, but I guess the cue cards he was reading off of didn't even contain fully one sentence at a time because he'd break up the sentences, sort of.
Yeah, it's possible.
Which is weird. I mean, I don't even really know how all of this stuff works, but you would assume they could at least give him a sentence at a time to read.
Yeah.
But whatever.
Oh, well. It was just nice seeing him on screen again, even if it was just terrible and difficult to watch for multiple reasons. But I think it's kind of made up for the fact that Troughton and Pertwee played off each other pretty spectacularly.
Yeah, I think we can both agree that having Troughton back was a joy, and well, I would not have enjoyed this serial were it not for the fact that it was the three Doctors. If this was just a Pertwee and Katie Manning serial,
if it was just any one Doctor, like even if it was just a Troughton serial, I don't think this serial could have been good.
No, it
required all three Doctors to make it good type thing. And that's what it was written for, so it achieved its goal. It served as a good celebration of the previous 10 years of Doctor Who.
Right, maybe they kind of knew that the narrative itself wasn't exactly up to snuff, so they're like, okay, this is going to be the three Doctors then to sort of make up for that.
Yeah, I think when it was being written, they knew they wanted to do something spectacular for the 10th season of Doctor Who, and I think the suggestion to bring back the other two Doctors was made, while they were still working on one of the drafts of writing. Of course, then they had to rapidly rewrite it to account for Hartnell not being able to walk around with Troughton and Pertwee. But oh well. And write out Jamie and Zoe.
I don't know, but I really liked Troughton's acting. Of course, he was fine to act as the second Doctor again, and it was just a joy seeing him back. And it made me realize, even though I've warmed up to the third Doctor, I really do like the second Doctor and Troughton's portrayal of the Doctor a lot more than Pertwee's. He's just a lot more fun-loving, fun-loving. He's just more fun to watch, and he's just a fun actor.
Yeah, but I think we'll get some more moments like that with Pertwee this season now that his exile's been lifted and he can go anywhere and he's not trapped on Earth for seasons on end.
I don't think it's going to be Troughton tier, though. It's still going to be Pertwee's.
It'll be different. It'll be unique to Pertwee.
Yeah, it'll still be his more serious portrayal of the Doctor.
Yeah, but so that's that.
A dandy and a clown.
Right. One of the books is set in the first Doctor, Stephen and Vicky era, and I think it's actually like in the book the first Doctor gets taken out to go help the Doctors, and then he comes back like a couple minutes later, and he doesn't remember the event, obviously, but he only remembers it involved a dandy and a clown. And he's like, well, I don't know what it was, but... And I think for Troughton, the story is said later to take place during the Jamie Zoe era of his run.
Well, that would make sense since it was originally going to feature Jamie and Zoe.
Yeah. So I guess if you were curious, yeah, that's the thing. That's about all I have to say about this serial. It's just kind of fun. I thought it worked as a 10th anniversary thing. Probably wouldn't have worked anywhere else, and it was nice seeing Troughton and Hartnell back on screen.
Yeah, it was good, if only for its fan service. Really.
Yeah, it was a bit fan servicey, but
hey, what can you expect from, having the other Doctors back? I guess that's what it was written for.
Right.
So,
But yeah, so that's that. You can email us at thedoctordecadvegetable.com if you are so inclined to comment on our future selves appearing. Jeez, that was weird. Also, anything else you have questions about, you can email us. Check out the YouTube channel at Trust Your Doctor. Guess what? Susan Retrospective is totally done being edited. I'll put it up on YouTube eventually. But it's done being edited finally, and it'll be up eventually. Check out the website at decorativevegetable.com for the death count and any other curious things about the show, and you can check us out on iTunes and rate us if you like the show.
and also check us out on Facebook, like us on Facebook, and next week we're watching The Carnival of Monsters, but until then, the end.